The Thousand Years' War, the Second Seeding, the Drakon and Dracos, the Annunaki and Nephilim, the Elohim, Seers, Saras and the Egyptians, Return of Sphere of Amenti, and Thousand Years' War, 3,700,000-848,800. Yeah. Great hope lived within the promise of the fifth root race Aryans and their Hibiru cloister of the second seeding, for they held within their morphogenetic field and DNA imprint the frequency patterns of the fourth dimension. The Elohim of HU3 paid special favor to these races and assisted a few select families, whose codes were not contaminated by mixed breeding. The Elohim assisted these families in releasing the seal of Palater within their genetic codes, by transplanting their energetic bodies into Elohim morphogenetic fields. The Elohim hoped that, by the accelerated evolution of these chosen groups, the vibration rate of Earth's grid could accelerate more rapidly so the sphere of Amenti could be returned to Earth's core and the seal of Palater lifted from all of the races of the second seeding. If 8% of the races could assemble the fourth DNA strand and increase the vibration rate particle pulsation rate of their personal bodies and bioenergetic fields, the particles of Earth's grid would also accelerate to D4 frequencies, high enough to hold the sphere of Amenti with its fourth-dimensional frequency coding. Once the sphere of Amenti was returned to Earth's core, the souls of the second seeding races could return to their morphogenetic fields upon death and would no longer suffer the fragmentation of consciousness into the D4 astral and D-2 elemental kingdoms. With the return of the sphere morphogenetic field, the memory of the races would be entered into Earth's grid, and the strand particles of DNA that brought that memory imprint into the personal cellular memory would reassemble within the operational DNA strands of the entire fifth race, returning to the incarnates the memory of their place and purpose within the evolutionary drama. Opening the sphere of Amenti within the Earth's core would automatically accelerate the process of building DNA strands and incarnational evolution for all of the races. And for those who completed assembly of the fourth strand, the seal of Amenti would be released, allowing for ascension to Terra through the halls of Amenti. The Lemanians and Urantrians and Brinawa, and the Aryans and Hibiru of the second seeding evolved on Earth together 3.7 to 1 million years ago. Approximately 1 million years ago, a race called the Drakon from HU1 Orion star system came to Earth and tampered with the genetic code of the races. They created hybrids within the root races called Dracos, contaminating the human genetic code and altering the evolutionary imprint for numbers of the Amenti souls. The Drakon race is a sentient, intelligent race of upright standing, dragon lizard-like beings with a tendency toward aggression and warlike behavior. They represent a digressive strain of a superior reptile-like race from HU3 and frequently had poor relations with the HU1 Galactic Council. They were expert geneticists and scientists, but showed little regard for other life forms and lacked spiritual development. The Dracos hybrids were more lizard-like in appearance, with body structure more closely resembling humans, but facial features and temperaments characteristic to the Drakon. The Drakon also tampered with certain strains of Earth dinosaurs, who were seeded on Earth about 375 million years ago as an experiment by other ET races, creating aggressive, carnivorous monitors for their captive human populations. Many of the cultures of the second seeding abandoned their advanced surface cultures and retreated underground to escape the terror of the Drakon monitors. The Falzants, Chupacabras, were also created at this time, combining certain animal strains from the Drakon planets with various Earth animals. The Falzants and descendants of the Dracos are presently assisting Zeta visitors with earthly agendas detrimental to the human populace. These intrusive visitors of Dracos lineage are in reality a hybrid mutation of our human ancestors who evolved within the Orion star system. As they are members of the human lineage, they feel entitled to use the territories of Earth, even though their race was banned from here nearly 850,000 years ago by the Breno. Like most Syrian Annunaki strains, the Dracos also carry the genetic configuration of the 666 Templar Axion seal, previously discussed. The soul essence of the Dracos is part human and part Drakon. The Drakon and their creations became a menace to the developing races, and so plans were orchestrated to dispose of the Drakon problem. About 956,500 years ago, With the assistance of Annunaki visitors from Sirius A, the races jointly employed a plan of using the power within the Earth's grid to destroy the underground habitats of the Drakon and their monitors. The plan backfired, creating an explosion within the Earth's crust, which created climatic anomalies, flooding, a slight pole tilt, destruction of part of the land masses, and finally a small period of global ice that ended about 950,000 years ago. Most of the Drakon left Earth during this period or were destroyed by climatic conditions. Most of the human races retreated underground, creating sophisticated cultures beneath the Earth's crust, some races being permitted to enter the portals of the inner Earth. Once environmental conditions stabilized, many races returned to surface life, rebuilding their civilizations. Though most of the Drakon had vacated or perished, they left a legacy of genetic distortion behind them that threatened the continuation of the human lineage. Earth animal interbreeding became a problem in the races of the second seeding and host matrix transplants. See Voyager's I-2E, page 76. Were being used to realign the human genetic codes. The races of Amenti began to digress further due to Drakon contamination of the genetic lines, and several other ET races used this opportunity to experiment with the human evolutionary imprint. Some of the more primitive human-like forms of early man arose from such experiments, as did some of the ape-like human varieties. But the human lineage did not originate from these primitive forms. These forms emerged from the distorted human imprint. Many such mutations were also created prior to the Electric Wars. The Lemanian and Atlanian cultures fragmented, became factions and began warring. The Atlanians of the second seeding were influenced by descendants of the Syrian Annunaki race from HU2, which later evolved for a time on HU1 planet Mars. The same race that had instigated the Terran Templar Solar Initiates rebellion against the Syrian Council, which culminated in the Cataclysm of Terra. The Elanian civilization began to systematically disregard the Law of One. The Annunaki brought to Earth Atlania the creed of the Templar Solar Initiates from Terra, an elitist, materialistic distortion of the principles of the Law of One, which had created the Cataclysm of Terra. The Annunaki added their own sexist slant to these teachings, so women would be viewed as subservient to men and therefore able to be used as breeders of hybrid children. This teaching was a tactic used to socially disempower women so they would have little support to reject the sexual advances of the Annunaki males. The Annunaki created teachings that made them appear to be the gods of the human race, and through these teachings were easily able to manipulate the Atlanian cultures into cooperative submission. The Annunaki proceeded to bring forth a race of human Atlanian Annunaki children who were called the Nephilim, who entered the Earth system about 950,000 years ago. Having more developed genetic codes via their Annunaki fathers, the Nephilim quickly dominated the less developed humans, creating a highly advanced materialistic culture built upon exploitation of less evolved life forms. Many genetic experiments were carried out, creating varieties of animal humans, terribly distorting the human genetic imprint. Lemanian culture was not affected as greatly by the Annunaki infiltration, as many members of this race retreated into the underground, becoming involved with the priests of Mu who guarded the portals of the inner earth. The Terran priests of Mu commissioned many of their immortal members as guardians of the inner earth since the beginning of the Turanusium II experiment. Around this time, 950,000 years ago, the Elohim and Ra Confederacy orchestrated massive host matrix transplants, removing the distorted Nephilim racial strains from their connection to the Amenti morphogenetic field and splicing them into the morphogenetic fields of other entities from HU3. HU4 and HU5. The transplants were conducted in order to prevent the human morphogenetic field from becoming contaminated by the Annunaki and Drakon genetic lines, which would have taken human evolution in a completely different direction. In order to orchestrate the transplant, certain frequency patterns within the DNA were dismantled, but left within the cells. Contemporary junk DNA so the souls involved could eventually plug in the frequency codes and evolve into the Amenti morphogenetic field. Once their code distortions were corrected, the humans involved in the transplants, who were already genetically altered by the seals of Amenti and Palator, now had even more genetic distortion to repair. but without the transplants they would never have fulfilled the human evolutionary imprint to ascend. During the second seeding, the Elohim motivated the HU2 Seers race, descendants of the HU2 series, to assist in realigning the genetic imprint of the earthly race strains, and the Seers energetically interbred with certain members of the Atlantean and Aryan races, creating a superior guardian race called the Seres, who later became known as the Egyptians. The Egyptians were originally one of the 7 sub-races within the Atlantean root race. The original morphogenetic field for this sub-race became distorted through Annunaki interbreeding of the Nephilim, at which time the Elohim and others removed the distorted portions of the Egyptian morphogenetic field from the sphere of Amenti, placing this portion of the race under the care of a host matrix family from the Ra Confederacy called the Aten. The portions of the Egyptian subrace that remained in the Amenti morphogenetic field were fused with the morphogenetic field provided by the HU2 Seers, which created a hybrid Egyptian race called the Seres, who became the pharaonic line within Egyptian culture. The Seres Egyptians began a new line of Egyptian bearing an advanced genetic strain. Later, during the third seeding, the Egyptians carrying Syrian Annunaki Nephilim morphogenetic fields were remixed with the Seres Egyptians so the morphogenetic field of the Syrian Egyptians could be integrated into the sphere of Amenti. Descendants of the Seres Egyptians held the line of Egyptian royalty throughout the early dynasties, but eventually the Syrian Egyptians were integrated into this line and, for a time, open relationships with the Syrian, Annunaki and Syrian blue races resumed. The Egyptians carried a specialized genetic code because of this early morphogenetic manipulation. During the third seeding this imprint became even more specialized as portions of the Egyptian line were adopted by the sixth race cloister Melchizedeks, who served as a host matrix family to realign an overdevelopment of Annunaki genetic coding. Of all the human races to walk the planet, the Egyptians carry the most diversified genetic code. The Melchizedek Egyptians of the third seeding orchestrated the Atenist movement about 3,000 years ago, in order to redirect Egyptian culture back toward practice of the Law of One, teachings that had fallen into digression through Annunaki involvement with Egyptian culture. The Seres were created during the second seeding about 945,000 years ago, their Atlantean subrace morphogenetic field being merged with the Brinawa and Hibiru cloisters of the fourth and fifth races, which brought the Aryan and Hibiru lineage into the Atlantean Egyptian line. This realigned and advanced the genetic blueprint for the Egyptian subrace, creating what would become the primary Egyptian lineage throughout the third seeding. After a period of development, the human evolutionary imprint began to prosper, and about 900,000 years ago the Elohim, and the Syrian Council, Seers and Paladorians of HU2, re-entered the sphere of Amenti into the earth core. At this time Syrian Annunaki from HU1 and HU2, along with Drakon and other sympathizers, decided to take human evolution in another direction. Still angered over Elohim interference with their Nephilim race, the Annunaki from Sirius A devised a plan to destroy the sphere of Amenti and utilize the Earth humans as a worker race to harvest Earth gold for Annunaki purposes. The Annunaki of Sirius A needed gold to replenish depleting elements within their planetary atmosphere. Wars broke out between the earthly Nephilim and the Seres, which escalated about 850,000 years ago into a great intergalactic war between the Elohim and the Annunaki, each fighting for control of the Earth territory and the evolutionary direction of the human lineage. This war became known as the Thousand Years' War as it lasted approximately 1,200 years. 850,000 848,800 years ago. Most of the Earth races sought exile in other planetary systems. Some retreated to the inner Earth and most of the Nephilim were relocated to Sirius A and later to the planet Nibiru. The few races remaining on the surface were destroyed by the ravages of high-tech war. Again the Breno of HU5 had to intervene, and about 848,800 years ago they assisted the Elohim and Syrian Annunaki to negotiate a treaty through which both the Annunaki and Elohim would assist in the third seeding of the human lineage.